Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Soundararajan. I'm a technical architect at Cinderwood.
And I'm Swaroop. I'm site reliability engineer for Accelerant.
Oops. Yes, sir. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about Drupal. So, and running it in Docker. Uh, Docker is a container system. So, how many of you have used Docker for your local development? Cool, nice. And for your QA and continuous integration testing processes, does anyone use Docker?
Are you saying have used or used consistently?
Anything.
Never touched.
Anything, yeah. All right,
Have you
cool.
ever tried?
And how many of you use Docker in production? All right, okay, so this talk is. All right, cool. Nice. So this talk is about using Docker in production. We're not going to focus too much on running Docker for your local development and focus more on packaging and shipping and using it. So what is Docker? Docker standardizes the way we ship applications. So if you think about things like a Debian file or a DMG or in Windows an MSI file, it's a way you ship an application. So Docker is something similar to that. It lets you share your system resources like CPU, memory, and I/O across your applications. And one of the important things about Docker compared to some other solutions you may have used is the noisy neighbor problem. So let's say you have two websites running on the same server, and one of them gets a lot of traffic. The other one is throttled because you're using the same Apache process to handle both, right, in a multi-site or even a virtual host setup. So Docker nicely solves that problem by having every application have its own process space, and the CPU resources are limited per process space. So the noisy neighbor problem is nicely solved. You also have good isolation of application. So on the Linux kernel, you have C groups that puts each process into its own sort of jail, and so one application cannot leak into another application. Whereas like a common thing you've seen in multi-site especially, you have two websites, a.com, b.com, and if it's on a multi-site path, you could go to a.com slash sites slash b.com slash files and refer to an image of a different site. You have things leaking into each other. So that is not possible here because they are in their own C group. So before Docker came along, there were a few container systems like LXC and FreeBSD jails. But Docker really became popular because the tools it provides makes it really easy for someone to get involved with containers and start playing with them. So before we go in depth into Docker, let's look at a quick comparison between virtual machines and Docker. So in the case of a virtual machine, you have a hypervisor and the guest OS runs on the hypervisor, and on top of the guest OS, your application is running. So this is how a virtual machine looks like. In the case of Docker, uh, all your containers are sharing the same kernel of your operating system, right? So the hypervisor and the guest OS is avoided, that by saving you a lot of memory per machine. You also have C groups isolation, so you know it is not as secure as running your own OS, but it's pretty much okay for most applications to have a process separation. The another point to look at is a VM to boot up takes a few minutes, whereas a Docker container to boot up takes a few seconds because it's basically the same as starting a process. So in order to have your application run on Docker, you need to write a Docker file, right? This is how you specify how your application is built. So you would put a Docker file in the root of your project repository, and it's typically called Docker file. You have It's a really simple syntax to use. You have commands like from, working directory, run, copy command, and so on. You also have the option to use a Docker ignore file, which allows you to specify files that should not go into your image. So if you're having some any kinds of secrets or keys or something, you shouldn't put it in your container. You could also choose to avoid putting documentation or what have you. So let's look at our case, how we have written Docker file for our project. So we start with the from command, right? So the from command is used to specify the base image from which we are building on top of. So in this case, we're using the PHP 5.6 Apache image as a base. So the good thing about using this is you don't have to worry about the operating system or Apache or PHP. Those three things come from your base image, and you can just start building things on top of that. If you want to explore how the PHP image is built, I'd suggest you go to hub.docker.com, look at the PHP official image that has a Docker file that specifies how PHP is built. And if you go further up the chain, you keep seeing how the base image of that is built and so on. So this is a good way for you to study other projects' base file, Docker file, and see how Docker files are written. The next command you see here is run Apache to enable module rewrite. The rewrite module is used by Drupal for clean URLs. So that's something we want to do at the beginning. So the next line, we deal with some of the packages we need for Drupal to run. So yeah, so we run apt-get update. So your base OS gets all the necessary repositories, and then you have apt-get install, where you install a bunch of packages that you need. And Docker comes with a couple of useful scripts that let you install PHP extensions. So instead of figuring out how to do pickle install, and before you can do pickle install, you need to install pickle itself. You have a nice script that lets you do all that. So that's Docker PHP extension install, and you just specify which extensions you want, and that will go do pickle install for you. You can also configure your extension and say this is how the GD module must be configured. So this is another step in the process. A pro tip at this point is this file is going to keep changing as during the life of your project. So you would want to organize the packages in alphabetical order so that in future, if you want to insert a package, you put it in the right place. And later, if you want to refer to and see, like, do I already have this package? It's sorted so you can easily refer back to it. Continuing on, next we will be installing Composer and Drush. So these are the commands that will run and get Composer and pipe it into a PHP process. So it's going to install Composer at user local bin directory and that particular version of Composer. And now that Composer is installed, we use Composer to install Drush. So this is how we sort of build on top of, right? So first you had PHP and then you install Composer, and now using Composer you're installing Drush. And now we come to our main application code. If you've been using Docker in development, one of the things you're probably used to is mounting your source code into the var www directory. But since this is production, you don't want to do that. You want to copy your whole source code into the container image so that at production time, when you want to run your container, you're not going and fetching packages and dependencies. Your container has everything it needs to run. Yes, Scott.
I recently
Uh,
read that it's better to do that copy at the end for performance. So you
Absolutely.
can expand your container better instead of.
I'm going to come to that point. I need to copy because the next two commands depends on me copying. So
Oh, I see.
you're right. We are at the end of the file, and I have two more commands after the copy. So it is at the end.
Got it.
Yeah. So we copy our source code into the var www directory, and then we do a drush make. So we're going to talk about makefile in just a bit. So basically, it's a way for us to go fetch Drupal core and Drupal contrib modules into the container image. And after that, we do Composer install. So this will fetch all the Composer dependencies and packages and put it into the image. The last step is uh, the base image expects our doc root to be at var www.html. But since our project uses doc root, I'm just creating a symbolic link pointing HTML to doc root. So What is drush makefile? Chris had a session earlier today talking about drush makefile, and I'm just going to quickly revisit this and sort of give you the highlights. So, some of the important advantages of using a makefile is your build becomes reproducible, right? So it's not like I installed today, I got views version 3 point something, and then 5 minutes later Scott installed and he got 3.2, and we both have now a conflict on, hey, it's working for me, it's not working for you, and so on, right? So your makefile has a pinned down version of which views module we're using. Another advantage is your repository is clean. You only have your code. You don't have Drupal core and Drupal contrib modules. And a really important advantage is do not hack core. This has not been said enough times. If you don't have core in your repo, you cannot hack it. You cannot make a pull request because it is simply not there. You git ignore the whole core, right? And the core comes at the build time using your makefile. And when you do want to hack core, you write a clean patch and you list it as a patch in your makefile. So that's the correct way of maintaining packages, maintaining your patches. If you're going to do it directly in your repo and then a module update comes along, you're going to be doing a lot of diff and merge conflict and everything. It's going to be messy. So, and the last reason is ease of updating. So, how many of you subscribe to the Drupal security newsletter? That's nice. Everybody should be subscribing. Typically, security releases come on Wednesday afternoons. And so, next question, how many of you make pull requests on Thursday morning? Okay, that's really bad, right? If you had a makefile, all you had to do is go into the makefile, change your version of the module. Let's say Views released a security patch, for example, from 3.1 to 3.2. You just edit your makefile 3.1 to 3.2. It's a one-line change. Make a pull request, and you should be able to have a rest of your CI process to merge it and put it in production in the next 15 minutes. That's like kind of what we're going to see today. So really, subscribe to the security newsletter and stay on top of your modules. So we saw during the Docker file process a couple of files that we needed. So one of them is a makefile. The other one is settings PHP. This got copied into the project at one of the steps. So what you see here is we do not hardcode secrets in settings.php. We want to keep them isolated in an environment variable, and that will get injected at runtime by Docker. So we create environment variables for DB name, user, password, host, and a couple of interesting things is base URL and cookie domain. We're going to see the reason for that in just a little time. So that's about settings.php. And now you're ready to build your Docker image. It's really one simple command, docker build -t, and then your image name :tag. So in our case, it's synduit/synap :1.0.0. And the last dot indicates that your Docker file is in the present folder, in your current folder, right? So you don't want to be doing build on your machine. You really should be setting up an Jenkins job. So all your build happens in a clean, isolated environment. So consider setting up a Jenkins job. Or if you have a Docker Hub account, then Docker Hub has automated builds. You could set up a webhook from your GitHub to your Docker Hub. And whenever you push a tag to GitHub, it will fire the build command on Docker Hub. So it's like completely out of, you don't have to manage that part. You just push a tag to GitHub and everything happens automatically. And the image is built and put on Docker Hub. So assuming you're building on your local Jenkins box, next you need to push the image to somewhere, right? And that somewhere is basically where your Docker image is going to be stored. So some of the popular options are Docker Hub, Quay, and running your own custom box. So I would highly recommend Docker Hub or Quay. Running your box is something you should consider only if you're like a large enterprise and you want to have control over your private images. In which case, it's completely possible. Run a box. The Docker registry is open source software. You can find it on github.com/docker/distribution and set it up and run your own thing, and you can push to that. So there are just two commands at this point: Docker login, where you specify your login credentials to Docker Hub, and Docker push, which pushes the image from your Jenkins box to the Docker Hub. So what we've seen up to now is building the Docker image, it's kind of where the dev team stops working and the ops team comes into the picture. Now they're going to take the image and run. And for that, I turn over to Swaroop, who's going to talk more about that.
Hi again. Uh, Anyone know about Rancher? So is it in production development? Okay. So Rancher is a Docker orchestration software which helps in maintaining containers with high availability. So it's a simple architecture, master minion. So master is something Rancher server, and minion is nodes added to the master server, where master server will have control over nodes. And uh, it supports different ways to orchestrate Dockers using Cattle, Kubernetes, and Swarm. But Cattle was the best choice for us to go. So here the master again has high availability. You can configure it with 3 node cluster and 5 node cluster. In case of 3 node cluster, if one master rancher goes down, it won't be a big deal for you to stop affect your production. But if 2 nodes goes down, then it's going to affect your production. So Rancher again comes with inbuilt cloud services like AWS, DigitalOcean, Linode, etc. And you just have to give your API keys, and Rancher will handle to create nodes for you. And it also got catalogs. It's an inbuilt services or stacks, I would say, like ClusterFS, Rod 53, and Zookeeper. Many catalogs are around in Rancher, so it's a one-click deployment for you. And it has nice REST APIs. You can build your own tools for automating Rancher deployments. And yeah, I'm going to tell something about installing Rancher server. So uh,
Sorry,
you yeah,
do you use the REST APIs?
yeah, we do. Yeah,
We're going to come to that in just a minute.
yeah, we're gonna come to
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very simple setup. You need to have a operating system of your choice. So Ubuntu, Debian, or CentOS will work, and you got to have Docker software installed on it, and you don't need any dependency softwares like Java or something else, since Rancher comes shipped as a Docker image. So you just have to run the Docker command with the image Rancher server, and your site is up. So Rancher has really cool web interface. This is especially useful if any newcomer wants to understand about Docker and doesn't know about CLI much. So he gets to know very well. And yeah, here setting up minions, it's quite similar to Rancher Master. But the other things we had is installing cluster and mounting volume on it, since we have to maintain the data persistency for Drupal applications. So the step 4 is a command where you get from Rancher master node. So you have to run that on minions in order to add the minion to master. So all this stuff is on Amazon. We hate to do manual clicks to launch servers and add it to Rancher. Used CloudFormation, and for the ease of making keeping infrastructure as code, we uh, we used CloudFormation, and everything is written in YAML, and it's version controlled in GitHub. So the other catch is Minion installation steps are packaged in AMI with user data. So all the steps you see there, the commands, everything will go to user data. When we scale up the minion, it automatically runs the Docker command and gets added to Rancher server, and we don't need to manually intervene and see if it's running or not. So it's all done with CloudFormation. And something about stacks and services. It's stack holds one or more services. Service is an application where Dockers are spinned up. So in service, we can link one Docker to other Docker, like link Drupal application with MySQL, and also Rancher assigns a separate IP address which is coming from overlay Rancher overlay network. Uh, so this can be explained in the later slide. So again, the services has HA high availability, and it gives you ease to map the ports with hosts, and you can inject the environment variables here, and the you have different network managing, like different networks you can configure over there, like managed network, and you can have it as a bridge. And yeah, you have a volumes, you can mount it over here in the service panel. And yeah, if you have a high traffic, high load, the scaling is not a big deal uh, in Rancher. So coming to the stack, adding stack is just 2 clicks. You just have to name it and click create, that's it. And services are created within the stack. You need to name the service, give the image name, give the environment variables. Those are the environment variables for this simple Drupal application. And by injecting different environment variables, we are able to use the same Docker image to run different Drupal sites. Yeah.
I actually distracted myself for a second
Okay.
because I thought I knew what you were talking about. Now I saw this interface. What is this? What's this UI?
Yeah, this
Rancher.
is Rancher.
Oh, this is Rancher. Okay.
Rancher.
Yeah, this is how you add a service in Rancher.
Got it.
Yeah, if you can go one step back.
Yeah.
First you add the stack,
Got it. Okay.
and then inside the stack you add your service. So the Docker image that you built is in the first step. You select your image,
Yep.
and then you inject your environment variables. So that way you don't have to have secrets in your image. All your secrets are managed outside the image.
Right. And the options box before was that like you will override it.
So
Oh, I see. Okay.
this
Yeah.
is a different way of creating a stack. We're not using that. If you want, you can write a Docker compose file and throw it in here. Or we could just do it from the UI and create your service from the web interface, which is the next step you see.
So here we go. Mounting volumes. You can have like we usually mount GlusterFS here with the containers. Any Docker volume driver works with the Rancher. We earlier used Flocker for mounting MySQL, but we backed for some reason, and we're gonna go back in future and use Flocker. And here is the routing. This is a load balancer, comes as a service by default from Rancher. So it's a name based routing. So you give your domain there and link your service, so the traffic on your domain will be redirected to that particular container.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
also going to ask, when you showed your stack picture, since you're talking about prod, would that also be where you throw your varnish cert container?
Varnish.
We're not
Yeah,
using
we are
varnish
not
at the
using
moment,
that.
but that would be outside of your cluster.
Would be
You
outside
can
your
choose to
cluster,
put it in, but
But you would, but when you had the MySQL, Apache,
Right.
etc., you would
Right.
also have like varnish container.
totally, yeah, you can do that.
Or the other.
Yeah,
can
you
totally
can
do
do
that.
it. Then again, you can link up Varnish with Drupal on
Right.
different port. Yep.
You doing Docker port mapping, or you using straight through ports?
So Rancher has an overlay network.
Yeah.
You're gonna see the network diagram in just a minute.
So we moved to Nginx and we use Rancher SkyDNS for internal routing. Reasons for moving to Nginx proxy is Rancher load balancer is based on HA proxy. So for 1,000 websites, we need to write 1,000 rules. It's going to be overhead and managing that. So if you look below, there's a shell which shows ping response of an internal domain for Swaroop 1.2 service. So the SkyDNS format of a domain is something like service name, then stack name dot rancher dot internal. So when whatever request like Swaroop 1.2 dot Swaroop.com will come to service name. It's programmed in Nginx to route that way. Yeah.
So this way we don't have to write 1,000 rules for 1,000 websites. It's just one rule. Extract from the host name the name of the website, and then throw in .rancher.internal. So it's sort of service discovery through DNS that comes with Rancher.
Yep. And again, going back to our settings.php.
Correct.
Why
Yeah.
have you used SkyDNS as opposed to Route 53?
Rancher has tidiness built into it. We're just piggybacking on top of
I
that.
think it has Route 53 built in as well.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
recent.
So
That's something you need to do out, as in you need to configure it. But if you don't configure anything, Rancher has a built-in DNS server.
Where you don't have to do anything else.
You don't have to do anything else.
Yeah.
So it's not a web service it's using.
It has its own DNS
Yeah.
uh,
But it's-
server.
yeah,
Right? It's
For-
not
It's not
like
external.
a web service. It's not,
It's
like,
not
No,
a web
no.
service. It's not outside. It's built into Rancher.
Right.
And anytime you bring up a container, it's assigned a IP, and that is sort of mapped to the DNS using this kind of name format,
Yeah. I didn't
and
know
that's
you-
present in Rancher's DNS. So we're just leveraging that instead of going to a Rancher load balancer and writing 1,000 lines of rules. We're just piggybacking on the existing naming convention of Rancher.
and yeah, we can use Route 53, but it got limitations of using 1,000 records, right? 10,000 records.
I think that 10,000 C names or A records,
Yeah.
and right now we have 1,000 customers, but hopefully we'll go beyond 10,000. That's going to be a limitation on Route 53.
Got it.
So yeah.
And yeah, again, going back to our settings.php, you can see how Drupal can wrongly assume that its base URL is. So when in fact the correct URL is swaroop12.sindio.com. So this can mess up with relative hyperlinks and links to CSS, JS, and well, as refuse to let you log in because the session cookies is set in the wrong name. So that's the reason we had that cookie domain variable and the domain name in the environments. So this is the network architecture we currently have. So we have AWS ELB facing internet, and the we have 6 minions there. So the purple ones are the rev proxies, Nginx proxies, which are port mapped with the host machines on 80, and those machines are added to AWS ELB. And the other 3 machines does not have rev proxies, but every minion are connected to each other in a point-to-point IPsec VPN. So it's a full mesh. Minion 1 will have connection with Minion 2, Minion 3, Minion 4. The similar way it will have connections to each other, and the same way they share the metadata of each container. Yeah, so when the hit comes into purple, it redirects to container depending on the request. So Rancher minions, yeah. So containers on one minion will have access to containers on other. Yeah, it might be a little challenge for scaling applications while hosting stuff on Docker, but with Rancher, to increase the count of containers, just click on plus button. Boom, you got an extra container to serve better. And again, the service is responsible for balancing the load across the containers. This is the main part. Like, if you have a new software and you want to upgrade, so assume the green circle is 1.0, and this is, we want to upgrade it to 1.2.0, and we upgraded it. So the orange one is in progress of starting, and once the 2.0 is live, the 1.0 is deleted. So you don't have any downtime here. See, it's a zero downtime deployment and upgradation. So SynMaker is one of the microservice which we developed on Symfony. It is integrated with Rancher APIs for creating Drupal site when user signed up, and it also used for upgrading sites. And yes, we do upgrade 1,000 plus websites with SynMaker. And here we go, 1,000 plus websites. All green circles are the Docker containers hosting Drupal sites. Thank you. Questions?
How much development do you have to put in to kind of connect Symfony with Rancher through the API? Was it easy? Do you find it reliable? You know,
Um, Under heavy load of Rancher Master, we found that it sometimes drops jobs you give it to do, like upgrade this container, and it sort of falls through the cracks. So we've written code to follow up and make sure that the job, in fact, is progressing and so on. So it's not that complex. It's a beautiful REST API, and it's really easy to use. And you have APIs to create a stack, create a service, upgrade a service. So that's how we create a Drupal site and upgrade a Drupal site using Rancher's APIs. And that's sort of what we've done with SynMaker, is to tie it together. SynMaker itself has REST API support, which our .com site uses. So when a customer signs up and puts in their credit card, we fire off an API to SynMaker, which then fires off a bunch of APIs to create a Drupal website. So it's not that complex at all. Yeah, I would say like you should have something going within a week. Uh, yeah,
That's interesting. And you, the load that you can support, you load tested the platform up to concurrent kind of traffic or level or something
so
like that?
the thing is, all our customers are low traffic customers. They're like small businesses, and so there's not really a lot of traffic coming in.
Yeah.
So our focus is more on density and not on traffic scaling.
Yeah.
And rather to see how many websites we can fit into one host to keep the cost down, right? So more density we achieve,
Did I miss
right?
Varnish in there? Do you not use Varnish?
Not right now, no.
That's what I was asking earlier.
Yeah.
It just wasn't added as one of the containers, but it could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
It could
Yeah,
be.
it could be. Yeah. The thing is, it's really as simple as spinning up one more service, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen how easy it is to create a service. You just have to create one more, and sort of have Drupal's Varnish module talk to the Varnish.
Yeah. And your statement, so you're using Gluster. You experienced any latency with Gluster?
Not really, no. So
That's the weird thing is even if you're using something like S3 for your file serving with Drupal, right? You're gonna want some sort of a mount, some sort of an NFS mount anyway for like your aggregated CSS and JS.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Because the S3 compatibility with that's just like shit. It's not useful.
yeah,
Which
So-
sucks because it would be great to not have any mount. You know what I mean? It'd be
So you're
wonderful.
using like a fuse mount or something?
Yeah, just some
Yeah.
mount amongst all the webs for your
Files
files
for-
directory for like
So you got a cluster.
just
There's
for
a-
aggregation.
yeah.
There's
That's-
NFS support as well.
Yeah.
Amazon just announced an NFS compatible
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
EFS.
So
Elastic
that's another way to like
Yep.
In 3
Yeah.
regions.
Reduce
they've
your-
had it for a
Yeah.
long time, but there's mount point limits, so you can only have up to I want to say 16 or something arbitrarily small.
Okay.
And so running a PAS is really hard because you need a billion mount points.
right.
Yeah, again, distributed file system is not the best choice for dynamic files like application cache and sessions.
That's gonna be slow. Yeah.
Yeah, but Gluster, you can have Gluster for your files directory.
That's basically what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all we're doing. Site's default files is coming via Gluster.
SynMaker thing, is that like proprietary?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I would love to do is yeah.
Is that
What
somewhere?
No, what I would love to do is work with John, and if there is a roadmap for Aegir 4 that is heading in this direction, we would definitely love to collaborate, work on that, and then we can switch to using Aegir 4. I'm sure there's. Is there any interest in using an Aegir for Docker Rancher?
Yes.
Can I see a show of hands?
Please do that.
Okay, then I'll take it. Back.
Yeah. So yeah,
I
if,
put up
if
4 hands.
right. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's already in the works.
It's not like SynMaker has anything super secret. It's just that it's very specifically to our needs.
Yeah.
We've hard coded a lot of
System
things,
and,
and the code is really messy. I don't want to show to anyone.
Just put it out there. Let us patch.
Yeah, no, that's too insulting.
Yeah.
No, I'd rather make a clean start on Aegir 4 if that's the direction Aegir community wants to go. That's something we'd really love to collaborate on.
Right.
Yeah.
Seems like good fit, John. Get it
Yeah.
done.
It's just a bot room, right? Frank's the last session there, I think. And then it's just open. And the whole week, not in here, but all day tomorrow is Aegir Summit. So the whole
That'd be great.
a lot of containers are here. And
I got a session. They'll be around for us.
the Mumbombo guys from DC that worked on NASA, Aegir for NASA are here.
Cool.
They're all really pumped about starting something for next, this kind of next generation stuff. Come by that room tomorrow.
Yep.
Country deep.
Yes, please.
I mean, this was a lot of focus on DevOps stuff, but if I can ask like a basic question.
Sure, yeah.
As somebody who's just started using Docker and using Docker on a Mac, and a lot of my colleagues are doing the same. What is the best setup today? Because it seems to change every day. Doing development work day to day on a Mac. What tool set should I be using?
I'm gonna turn that over to Frank. He's gonna talk about what he does with Ahoy. So go ahead, Frank.
Also, the answer just changed, right?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
well, what time is it?
That's what I said like today.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about that in the next session.
Oh, sweet.
But I think you highlight an important point that whatever tool you're using should be flexible enough to, if someone figures out a new way to do some Docker container that helps out with X, Y, or Z, or Docker itself is moving so quickly that sometimes the application itself is, different version. You have to change from one version of Docker to the next may have new APIs that are available that are really helpful. So whatever thing you go for is something that should be flexible enough to handle all those situations. So what I would advocate for is our tool called Ahoy, and we'll go into that in the next talk. And one of the nice things about it is it's sort of very flexible. It's sort of a wrapper for Bash that makes it easy for you to set up common commands. And so it's not Docker specific, but we use it all the time for local Docker development. And there are about maybe 30 developers who are using it now.
So in our company, we started using Ahoy last week. Up to now, we've been doing local development on Vagrant, and our focus has really been using Docker in production. Now we are starting to come back and use it more and more in development. So we started using Ahoy last week. It's really cool. You should check it out.
Sweet. Yeah, my experience with the last couple weeks is using new Docker for Mac, which
That's
Yeah, it's
in
not-
beta,
It's not just
and I'm not sure if it's. Do you really want to be using a beta software that crashes, or if
I mean,
especially?
it's pretty good.
For local
It
development?
is?
Yeah.
the biggest.
problem I have is like file sharing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
I've heard that all the time. Yeah, I've heard that all the time. So we are on Docker Toolbox. Go ahead.
So far, I mean, I tried it when it was beta, like it went to public beta a few weeks ago.
Right.
Right?
But
Right.
I heard the same thing about the file, where it's not slow for you.
Oh, I haven't tested speeds.
Right, that's the thing. So it works.
You
Last,
can also
I have
switch
a
to
specific
Linux
thread.
and use that in a native Docker. I've got some Linux colleagues that are like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well, yeah, I was,
We also have a tool called Universal Docker Installer, which is like a series of scripts that actually uses Ahoy to run the scripts. But it will set you up. There's been so many pain points of setting up an environment. Right now, the best practice is to set up NFS share, which is maybe 10 times faster than what you can get out of Docker for Mac or just the default toolbox setup. So we recommend going that way for now, but we're sort of just waiting on the sidelines, waiting for them to figure out this file sharing issue. As soon as the performance is there for the file sharing, we're going to advocate for Docker, not just Docker for Mac, but Docker for Windows, right? So
I was using Vagrant with Docker on top, and then Docker for Mac was just so much simpler. Like,
it's like so close. It's just if you have the problem with Drupal, if you have a small thing with, if you're doing maybe some development that didn't have 1,000 files, no, more than that. There's probably 10,000 files in Drupal, right? So the problem is there's so many files that as it goes to read these files, and if you're sharing the files across, that's the issue. You want to be able to basically edit on your local machine like you normally do now, and just have it magically update inside the container, right? And that's where things don't work well.
Like I've heard some people playing around with stuff like, don't share the vendor directory and some dependencies to like cut down the number of files that are being shared across the thing. That's a little bit of a win, but it's like, do I really want to go there? Like, it sounds like a mess.
And then if you're using an
you should only
IDE, they're
share
not.
the file structure like they are. You should have the rest should just be ephemeral storage.
Well, the trick is you want to be able to, like, using PHP Storm or Vim locally,
Yeah.
and you've got all of your stuff set up that way, you
Yeah.
want those changes to be reflected in the container
Yeah.
immediately, right? You don't want to have to do, like, a copy to copy them over each time you make a change. So that's right now that's the thing that's holding back local development with Docker. With Docker for Mac. But we have a solution with that. We set up the NFS mount for you and do all that. Druid also has a solution, but they sort of hacked something together. We try to use a little bit more.
And just to sort of pick up on what Elijah said, you're not going to like this solution. You could install Ubuntu on that MacBook.
Right. Druid is the solution.
Is there any other questions on generally about Docker?
I mean, it sounds like some more is going to be covered
I wasn't
next, right?
I wasn't really clear on. I mean, Rancher is using Kubernetes or Cattle.
Cattle.
And then,
So-
like the whole layer got skipped, kind of. I felt like.
Okay.
How does that all relate?
You were saying you could pick, right? You can pick your
Yeah, you can pick. It's your
Yeah,
choice.
but why? I mean, my understanding is Kubernetes manages all this stuff for you. I haven't used it.
Not all of it, though.
So
And
which
there's no
parts-
UI.
So,
So you have
um,
Kubernetes.
yeah.
And then how does this relate to OpenShift? If you're familiar with OpenShift.
It's kind of an alternative. The way I would word it is Rancher's an alternative.
That's
to
what I'm
OpenShift.
picturing. That's what I was
Yeah.
picturing.
So- So Rancher has an API engine through which we talk to it, and behind the API engine, it can use Cattle or Kubernetes or Docker Swarm
Or Mesos.
or Mesos,
So
right?
is Rancher really just the UI on top of Kubernetes?
It's
Or
an
whatever?
API engine, more
Ah.
importantly, and a task scheduler. If you're using Cattle, then that's a task scheduler. But yeah, it's an API engine with a web interface.
And what you were doing with linking and your ports and your host names and stuff
Right.
like that was actually Kubernetes doing the work, though, right?
No, Cattle.
Use
Cattle.
Cattle. So
I'm sorry.
if you can see
It was
the
actually Cattle doing the work.
yes,
Rancher was just like the sprinkle on top that made it look easier to use, kind of, right?
right.
Cattle is a
Cattle is a-
sub-project of Rancher.
Right.
So it's
Oh,
like
it is.
they started out with their own tool
So it's
called
very
Cattle.
integrated then.
Kubernetes was
Yeah.
still being figured out. Swarm didn't exist yet. Mesos was been around for a
And
while.
OpenShift is more for Kubernetes, actually, so it's more like the
If you're interested in spinning up a Kubernetes cluster, I would highly recommend you start a Rancher master and use that to start your Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah.
It is so much easier. You will still have hair on your head at the end of that.
I would really
Yeah.
hesitate to call Rancher sprinkles because it's.
I'm just trying to get a mental
representation
this is
of,
it. Like
of this.
the first time you use Rancher, it's likely you'll believe it to be magic because
Yeah.
you point it at AWS, it gives you the instances you need and sets them up without you thinking about them.
Yeah.
You point it at, for me, Route 53, it does all the auto DNS. Anytime I spin up any stack, it gives me DNS.
Yeah.
Like you point it, you can now point it at Kubernetes, I think probably on Google, and have it just manage your whole Kubernetes.
It's a
Like,
pain. I
it-
recently had that.
You're right.
Yeah.
So, but it does all of these things so automatically and so well that it just it bridges this massive gap from having to be a fairly hardcore Docker developer to you get this set up once and you can have your site builders manage this. It's not.
One caveat is
Well, it's also kind of just like a monitor. It's like you don't even have to use it. If you just run a Rancher container, give it the client access, right?
Yeah.
It basically is a UI which you spin up a container using any other tool, it shows up in the UI in seconds, and you get graphs showing memory and CPU usage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's magic. I
Yeah.
agree with that statement. But yeah, you can just put it side by side, and that's the cool thing about it is that it tries to sit by the side.
And
It's
it has
not
a
like
modular
Kubernetes where it
ecosystem
controls.
as well.
It's not like Kubernetes where it has to hyper control everything. It's great just to use as a monitor.
Yeah.
Because it shows the overall host, it's beautiful UI. It
Yeah.
shows like the machine, all the stats, and then it shows every single container on one page. You get like 100 graphs. It's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, and then there's a module ecosystem. Like there's modules in there for more functionality that's coming. It seems like they're developing in a really open, excellent way. So.
For additional
Some-
plugins, you mean?
yes, some like words of warning. So recently, I prefer Google's setup over AWS.
Okay.
It was a little more painful figuring it out because it's not a fully fleshed thing yet. Also, if you set up Kubernetes, because I already have a Kubernetes cluster, so I was hoping to like use just add this in and then be able to use that. Whether you use Swarm or Kubernetes or Cattle, the UI can be different. So there's not always exact one-to-one mapping of the way Kubernetes sets things up versus cattle. So there are certain little changes in the UI, but you can set them up separately. I think what they call them environments. What do they call them? Environments when you set these things up. So basically, you can have a Kubernetes cluster here for one client, and a whole nother cattle instance here for
Yes.
other clients. So you can not only can you build these where you have maybe a container per client, but you can set up whole clusters that are just per client.
So that could also
Just like one layer higher, like an entity to node sort of thing. It's one level higher than.
So you're seeing about 50 machines here. All of them are in one environment. So you could have another environment for your QA team, another environment for your dev team with 2 or 3 boxes in them, and that's completely isolated, and you're just reusing the same master.
Can I ask, are you using behat tests when you're doing Drupal upgrades?
Absolutely, yeah.
And where does that report to? Like, where is that within the Symfony app? You get reporting out about
That's
tests?
right now it's not automated. So we have automated from the pull request to running behat, but someone has to manually go and look at the behat results and merge the pull request.
Oh, and
So
then hit go?
yeah. So the behat results for us is published on Slack.
Right.
And up to then
How
is
long does the process take, do you find?
I can check my jobs and tell you. We don't have that many test cases. I would say 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can talk in the next one about.
So the whole talk is about behat, but Frank is going to talk about next. So yeah.
Okay.
And parallelizing that, we can talk about that.
Awesome.
We use Circle CI and parallelize it across our containers.
Cool. I think we are running out of time. All
Alright.
right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming.
everyone.